Hey, I'm Ike, and this is Draw Process. I'm going to draw a comic book page, process about what I'm doing on the page and off the page. So here we go.
And the thumbnail. The soldiers showing up on the raft, the other two on their boats. I end up changing that second panel a couple times on the page, trying to get a different shot I like more. And then the last three panels there, that's the last time you're going to see each of the characters and where they are at emotionally, what they're doing before the fighting starts on the next page, which is going to be a lot of fun. So I have a studio room now, believe it or not. My other videos with they have the art hanging behind me, that's in my living room. And I would sit with a kind of a really like a lap board, a large clipboard that's leaning over a bookshelf. And I actually like that setup. I sit on like a bar stool with my lap board leaning over the bookshelf. I can adjust the pitch of it just based on how close or far I am from the bookshelf. But I had it in the living room and it was working pretty well for me. I kind of like being able to draw around my kids and around where people are instead of isolating to a room. But I'm very happy about having this space, and I want to put it to really good use. And it's just better all around. I had some important art stuff in my garage, which is not climate controlled. So now that it's in this room, it's a much better place for all my things and for me to have easy access to them. And definitely looking forward to being able to do more videos and recordings and interviews and just virtual meetings. Some of that will be with Clever Kaiju. So the link's always in the description for that. It's an visual art community, mostly on Discord, but we do other things in person. And it's all about inspiring, encouraging, and supporting each other. I'm one of the co-founders, but we also have a studio. So we take on paid work, freelance work as a studio, and sort of share that with many times it's just the founders and I as we're getting this thing going, but sometimes other members in the community that we can reach out to cover something. So which is awesome. I'm really glad we can do that. Enough about that. Making comics and being the practice of my art, and encouraging you guys to do the same. We'll get on topic here. I'm not sure. I get comments sometimes about just the simplicity of my art, or how it's clear that I just enjoy what I'm doing and I'm doing it for the joy of it and so on. That's very true, but I guess I want to talk about that a bit. It's true, but this is my work. So I think it's really hard for artists to, especially authors or artists that are creating their own thing, if it hasn't broken through the noise and had great success in publishing and so on, then it's especially hard to feel that what you're doing is valuable or is work, that it's not just a hobby or something. But I'm dead serious about the work that I do with my art, and yes, I'm really just enjoying it, and I'm really just playing, and I'm not super motivated by sales and numbers and things. But for me, I'm dead serious about having fun when I do it. Like that what the work is a long process of approaching the art form and the story, the sequence, whatever the storytelling I'm doing, approaching it with playfulness. That I'm not bogged down. I'm not feeling overpressured, over self-critical, harsh. Like, yes, it's work, but I can't be like grunting my way through it because, it's not going to. That's not the long-term thing. And the thing is, this applies to all work in a way. You could imagine a carpenter, and maybe there's a young carpenter, and he's like trying to become more successful, and he's working really hard in long spurts, kind of overdoing it, maybe being a little reckless, a little dangerous, or just overdoing it, working harder than they need to. And then there's the older carpenter that's, not necessarily really old and like not able to do the job, but just a seasoned veteran. And there's a certain way that they can be playful and relaxed and confident, but relaxed. And they'll work hard when they got to work hard, but there's some sense of peace, some sense of confidence. And maybe some playfulness in the way they can banter and still smile through the work, because they learned that if you grit your teeth for 20 years, like you're going to kill yourself. Like you're not. That isn't what it means to be their craftsmen that they are. So it applies across the board, I think, to a lot of workers or craftsmen or artists or whatever. And so it's analogous to that I want to be playful and have simple art. And yet, for me, it's simple art. It's looser. It's more expressive. It's less planned out, and it's more of a performance. I mean, this is all just it's the way that I do it. It's different than carpentry, though, because I would imagine with carpentry there's more of a set way you're supposed to do it, and you get trained in that way and you do it that way. And maybe that's what's different between a craftsman and the artist is there are no rules for what I'm doing, and I have to make my way. I don't know. So I do think, I would admonish people to consider what I'm saying for themselves. Again, it's just my way of doing things, and I'm happy for other people to find their own way too. But I don't want people to just take my word for gospel or think that I'm just setting down the rules here, because I'm definitely not the expert in that sense. But I think other people feel the weight of the task. I mean, the project of it's not just the industry or something that puts pressure on us to conform and question ourselves and so on. But just the art itself, just the attempt to make an attempt at something this difficult can make you too serious, too rigid. And for me, that's not how I want to be as a person, and it's not how I want my art to be, because I don't want the art to reflect those qualities either. So I have to keep myself in check and move in the right direction as a person and an artist. And yeah, I'm going to keep going down this path. I said it from the start. I wish I had recorded my process from the first comic I made, because what a wealth of, even for me, to be able to look back at what I was doing and what I was thinking. And even now I know my thoughts and what I'm doing are, you could say, flawed. They're not like perfected. Or maybe they're misguided in some ways, or misinformed or whatever. But I can look at it and expose it, and then it can change and get better. And I think, I think other people can relate to that too. It's kind of the idea, like, the feeling that you have to be a total expert before you can present what you do to the world, or before what you have to say would have value. And I don't believe that. Like, I think if I had the confidence and the quality of playfulness, maybe stronger, and so on, the more, but anyways, if I had the confidence to share what I was doing, share my thoughts very honestly from the start, I believe it would have been valuable for people. And it would have been, I believe it would have been good to share. Now, it wouldn't have been some ultra master sharing, their craft, but it would have been valuable if I could get my ego out of the way, which would be very hard to do. And in some ways, I'm only starting now because I feel confident enough in my work that I feel like I can show off a bit, that some of what I'm showing is of good quality. Like, yeah, there's still flaws, but I don't feel like it reveals a total beginner. I feel like I can take pride in that, and that, that's my ego. But even now, I could have not started yet, thinking that, well, I'm not published, I'm not a big enough name, the art isn't as good as it could be, let me keep working. I still had to overcome my ego to start now. But I could have done it much sooner. I'm pretty sure on this page here, just a quick comment, I think I was still using the 2H pencil all the way through. I think it was after this that I've been good about using the 5H until I need to do final pencils, because I just had to erase that whole panel, and it's hard to see here, but in person I could still see the lines. I'm just kind of putting them back down a little better, but I only had to erase and start over because I couldn't layer more pencils on without going too dark, because I started with such a dark pencil to begin with. So that's a good thing I'm getting better about. It's it's more efficient, and it keeps me in the flow better. So I'm back on what I was saying. We have to overcome that concern, that pressure, and our ego, and be ourselves. Share what we do, and yes, you will reveal things you might be embarrassed by, but it is you'll be able to learn from it, and eventually you'll learn. In my experience, you eventually learn that it was nothing to really be ashamed of, that it wasn't a flaw, that it was a feature It was, it's something about you that makes you you as an artist, as a person, and it needs to be beautified and refined and incorporated and honored, and not eradicated and hidden. And so, I mean, that's another way I like even putting it like that, hidden. I think that, a beginner artist, part of what you're seeing is someone who hides themselves. So when you say someone looks like they're copying off someone else's style a lot, and that kind of looks like a beginner, well, maybe they're hiding their own qualities as an artist. Or if it feels stiff and kind of stiff, and you can tell, well, if the way they pencil doesn't seem to match the way they're drawing their figures, maybe through reference use or something. Some effort to hide, but don't get me wrong. You do have to hide things. Like, you do have to beautify. You do have to beautify and refine. That's the process of development, I believe. So I'm not opposed to that, but you get there through exposing it, embracing it, and this whole process that can go very quickly for you or slow. And a lot of that's mindset. That's just my experience. Let me see if I could give an example just to get more clear. Let's see. Well, I know there's the obvious one is my earlier work being compared to Mike Mignola, that's a complicated one, which I don't know if I've gotten into that here. My pencils are they were always my own, but the inking, I struggled. Well, I didn't like a lot of inking techniques that I found difficult to learn, and I didn't like it taking such a long time. So I found that I had a compositional ability and some decent grasp of form, where I could use a lot of shadow and simpler shapes to imply things and not just show it directly. And he was a good example of that for me. But other artists do it too. So yeah, I was pretty inspired by what he was doing, and it also solved some problems I found in my own work. I was never, tracing or copying or anything. It was my pencils. I was building the figures and the forms and the compositions, and then it was more the inking treatment that would maybe be more derivative. But yeah, kind of, it would kind of bother me if people said it looked like Mike Mignola's work. I was, multiple reasons, but some of that is just, let's keep it on art, because obviously I was concerned if people think that if they're not going to take me seriously as simply derivative. But it was also that it might reveal an amateur, beginner, someone who's derivative, because they haven't figured out who they are yet or something. And and I didn't so much want to be seen that way. But at this point, I have had other influences, and gotten more seasoned, more comfortable with the way I like to do things. And I don't even see Mike Mignola as much in my work anymore, or think about it. And I don't really care so much if people see him in my work, because it's like, sure, that's in there. Fine. I guess that's the confidence that builds. just through experience. At the same time, though, I never shied away from my work looking like Mike Mignola's. So like, I didn't like people commenting on that. I had, the whole experience around that, but I didn't stop what I was doing just because people would say that. I kept doing what I was doing, and I didn't intentionally try to stop looking like Mike Mignola. I just kept doing what I do regardless of what people said. And then over time, I got more seasoned and it got more refined and it's less like Mike Mignola. And that's all I think I had the foresight. It wasn't just by chance, but I had the foresight that was a wise direction to go. And that I didn't need to listen to people, because I knew that I wasn't copying someone else. I knew I was just growing as an artist and going my own way, and it just happened to be influenced by Mike Mignola. And that time would tell. I always, I believed that too, that time would tell. Yeah, that's true for everyone, I think. I think I mentioned it maybe last time, like, when I've looked at an artist and you can see a lot of really good qualities, like maybe it looks like mistakes and it looks rough or whatever, it looks wrong, messy, whatever, but you can tell that their character's showing. And then one of the things that happens as you get more refined is you start to recognize your characteristics, the character of your work, and the errors, the messiness or mistakes or whatever. And then you try to cover them up and hide them. And then your work can start to lose its life. So I guess that's basically, don't be afraid. Be more confident, have trust in the process. Because you don't want to lose the life in your work for that reason. I feel like I'm getting in muddy waters here of how much I have to say has to do with being an artist and how much is just life. Like life advice. I'm gonna share what I'm thinking and be as honest as I can here. There's definitely an element of this where I want to be helpful to people and share my perspective and insights, wisdom, whatever, failures even. But this is not an advice channel either. That it's my art and it's my practice that I want to share. So that's going to be interesting to. I guess I'm still figuring out what that will look like. But I do feel the call, you could say, the calling to share what I know and to try to help others. And at the same time, I don't want to get lost in that. And lose perspective. For example, I can't stop making my art. And being an individual, just to, save other people or whatever. So, and that I don't think that would really help them either. It just has to do with wisdom of how do you really reach a goal, like I was saying earlier with the carpenter example. Well, I struggled with this page. Here I am again. My pencil's too heavy, so I can't refine my pencils very well. You can really see me pausing and thinking here. it's I'm thinking there, how long is this raft? It's at least a square, but maybe a little more long than it is wide. And I decided it would go off of the panel. Visually that width would be, the length would be longer than it would go off the edge of the panel. So I'm kind of figuring that out. I'm trying to figure out, I'm referencing the page, how many timbers are underneath the wood plank decking. And it's like, okay, it's 4 and 4. 8 total on the front. Which I did that to make it easy for me to remember so that I can stick with that number. But I'm still referencing the page to get that right. And how many guys are on the raft was a thing. I never established exactly how many until a few pages ahead when you get a shot and you can see how many are on the raft. But through this fight sequence coming up, he runs through the crowd and different people are getting arrows in them or cut in different ways. And then there's other figures that he's running toward, or they're in the background, and then I've got to kind of keep people in the same spot on the raft, and the right number of people and with the right injuries and stuff. It was a bit of a pain. It wasn't. It's not too hard. It would be if I did this, if I drew it in a different way, it could be a pain. But that's why I'm figuring out my way of drawing it that doesn't feel too difficult. That was something I learned kind of back to the points on, Mike Mignola, for example. It seems like he only draws certain kinds of things. And with how simple the forms are, there's details and expressions that don't get expressed, and then there's cityscapes and crowds and things that don't get shown clearly either. And he's not alone. Jack Kirby or a lot of people influenced from kind of traditional comic art. There's a way of just positioning 4 middle background elements and to not really show them. There's the camera's in such an angle that you don't really and it's not even really in perspective. It's more faked in a way, but it makes it where it's unclear, and those things aren't shown clearly. But I have learned over time that I want to be able to show whatever my mind sees, whatever I see and want to show. Now, I do believe in directing, like refining even what your eye sees. Your mind. So if my mind is seeing things just laid out in front of me in a simple way, well, I've still got to move the camera around, choose my shots, choose the sequence and the panels on the page, and it's the directing. There's clever and good ways of telling the story visually that your mind might not do naturally. It probably won't. And so I believe in learning and trying those new things, but at the same time, something feels right about my natural choices, such as with this whole fight sequence. How much of the action is shown and the physical space that they're in each step of the fight. The way that the raft and soldiers on the raft here in this shot are clearly displayed from a kind of cinematic angle, but there's some clarity to what you're seeing because you can see the ground that they're on, that's established. And they're not hidden by shadow or whatever. They're just seen clearly. And there's something in me that likes to choose these shots, let's say, that establishes and shows things clearly, even in fight sequences where instead of the camera being really, choppy like in a Born Identity kind of film, on the action with lots of edits and the camera really close to the punches and stuff. I actually like to pull it back and show what happened, show what it looks like in space. So like I have those qualities in myself, the way I see things, and I want to be able to express them through my art. And to do that, I could not continue mimicking Mignola, you could say, like, or just down that path of how I was inspired by the simplicity and the really good composition and so on. I couldn't keep going down that path to be able to express what needed to be expressed in me. And so that's a good reason. I would say that's a good reason to change rather than to hide something. So this is a river. I don't use a lot of. I'm not using that many ripples in the water or reflections or shadows in the water. I'm learning to just let water be just a negative space. Just it doesn't need too many details for you to know it's water. It's the same with like wood. It doesn't have to have all the grain in it for you to know it's wood or something. So, and maybe it's unnecessary to show any indication of what it's made of. So yeah, that's a way that maybe I am moving in the simplicity direction, is I'm not clarifying a lot of those things, like what things are made of or are, other than how they can be understood in the full composition, not just in isolation, which also lends itself to maybe Mignola's way. Yeah, this page took a while. I don't know, maybe 4 hours. I mean, for me, that's a while. Because there's a lot of figures on the page, so that adds time in a way. And then I had to erase pencils and redo them because I'd used too heavy of a pencil from the start. And then things I had to figure out, like her clothing and armor, and then like how many people are on the raft and so on. Lots of little decisions. It helps when, if it's a scene where it's just you're in the same place you were a minute ago. It's a simple, easy to remember place, or you've drawn it a million times. The characters, exactly how they look because you've drawn them so many times. You don't have to reference the previous drawings you've made of them. That's always nice, but that's not my goal. My goal is I want to be able to sit down and draw a page and not have to know everything that's in it, that I can find what I need in that moment and make it work so that it's just immediately expressed. It's unified. It's like just all, yeah. So my thumbnails are very rough, so that I can do as little work on them as possible and immediately get to this stage and try to get it all done in this stage. There's very little, that I leave to color in the end either. Which helps that this is monochromatic, so I can't really leave anything to color. If you're going to know what it is, it has to be how I drew it. So that most of the work is happening on this page as much as possible. That's a fun panel with sun right in front of sword. So they're not looking at each other, they're looking at the soldiers in front of them, but you see Sword, his determined look, but Sun's worried look. And so this contrast between these two people. For this scene, I went with more of a noontime shadow, like the sun's kind of directly above mostly. I don't always put a shadow underneath people. That has to, for me, that's chosen every time for the composition. It relates to depth of field and contrast. So if a figure is the focus, is in the foreground, is close to the camera, their shadow might be more intense, more clearly visible. But if you see a crowd at a distance, you don't see their shadows so clearly. And so there's a point at which you don't have to just throw shadows everywhere all the time. And especially underneath people, because it can make it harder to compose and not have tangents, for example. Tangents typically is any lines that seem to converge, because your eye will group those together or be drawn to the point at which they converge. Even if you don't mean, if they don't belong to the same things, they don't mean to go together. So like a panel border running into a pole on the next panel that's right in line with it, it's not meant to connect. But the way you drew it, it's connecting. And but I think tangents fits within a canopy of the broader topic of how things are grouped, or made prominent or not, just how they are expressed. And so I find that if you have a group of figures and a group of shadows, well, let's say you have a canopy of trees. The shapes of the leaves that whatever you do to indicate that, and then the shape of the shadow of the leaves on the ground. If you repeat in a way the pattern of the trees with the shadow on the ground, then what you're creating is maybe a good thing, because they seem grouped and the shadows seem to belong to the trees, but it also kind of flattens the image out. Now that could be great if you have a figure right in the middle above the shadows below the canopy, because then there they are, seeming more prominent, to stand out more clearly. So I find even just like the positive and negative space creates these little groupings visually. Anyways, we're out of time. There's the final page. Remember, you can read the comic as I put one page out a week on my website. If you're using the old link, it's updated now. So now all my webcomics go to the same site, ikecomics.com. But the links are all corrected in the descriptions for these videos. And there it is. I'll see you next week.